Today, as we begin this session, I want to remind us of the ground that we've covered in preparation for today's lesson. We're talking about the 12 freedoms, and I have affirmed for us that those 12 freedoms represent 12 faculties of mind that when we were created by God or ideated in the mind that God is, universal mind, God put into the idea of our being 12 faculties of mind. We're mind beings, and as mind beings we have 12 abilities to relate to our lives. And these abilities, these faculties, when used correctly, give us the capacity to be in charge of our lives and to bring into our lives a wonderful fulfillment of good in every area of our lives. But most of us are like people who get into a brand new car today that's filled with all of this marvelous technology, and we haven't the slightest idea how it works. And so we're really just sitting on a bomb, but we're not loaded. And so what we're trying to do in this series is to understand God has loaded us with these incredible mind faculties. And only as we understand and know how to use them are we going to fulfill God's idea of what we should be. And again, as we've talked about, we think Jesus gave us a pretty clear indication of what it is we should be. Someone who is able to move in life with a great sense of centeredness and love and an assurance of prosperity and a capacity to know wholeness and to share healing with others. So what we have talked about are 6 of these faculties so far. We began with what I call the presence faculties. That is the ability of our mind to say yes, to be open to new ideas, or the ability to say no, which is to release ideas. And that's true again of the way we relate to our world. We can say yes to a person in our life, either in our posture or by our words, or again we can say no in the same ability. We take these things for granted, that I can say yes or no, that I can affirm things or deny things. But the only reason you and I can do this, that the mind works in that capacity, is because God has put this into our beingness. So, those are our presence faculties. And I said that they have locations in the body. And I'm throwing a lot of you at you if you've just joined this series, and I would suggest you start from the beginning to get into this gradually. But it's important that we review these things. What I have said, that the whole process of billions of years of evolution has been the God idea of man, of us, and that's generic man. God has put into this idea these capacities that have been responsible for shaping the unfoldment of evolution, and has over time gradually built a body form that was perfect for a better expression of the God idea. And so we have said that each of these mind faculties have centers of energy within our body. And the presence faculties, which I just talked about, of the ability to say yes and no, and I've called the no the renunciation faculty. These faculties, as a center of energy, are located in the bottom portion of our body torso, in our generative organ area. The next 2 faculties that we talked about were strength and order. And affirm this strength is our capacity to persist, to stand, to be patient. And order is that which gives us the groundwork from which we choose to express our strength. And we talked about how we can use that wrong, whether we can be very strong in a very wrong way and end up having great problems. So we need to make sure that we're in order when we decide to use our strength faculty in order to have it bring a positive result in our lives. We have said that the strength faculty is located, again, just above the lowest portion of our torso, in the lower muscular and skeletal area, between the pelvic area of our body, and that the energy center for order is located more toward the solar plexus. The next two faculties that we talked about were the faculties of love and wisdom. And I said these are really the command faculties of our consciousness and our life. That they are sort of like the buttons in your car where it would say, if you don't know what to do, press these buttons. Because if your life's not working out satisfactorily and you say, what'll I do? Those are two buttons you can push and be sure that you're doing the best thing you can do. And that is to turn on the faculty of love and the faculties of wisdom. Love is our capacity to think at one-ment. I call these faculties the unifying faculties. Love is our ability to think at one-ment. Again, we take it for granted that when you hold your baby in your arms, you say, oh, I just love this little baby. Where did that come from? It comes from your mind's ability to think at one-ment. You're just one with that baby. And the same thing is true with a pet, or if you just say, I love playing this game. You mean, I'm one with what this game does for me. But the only reason you have that ability to think and feel that way is because you have the love faculty in mind. And the wisdom faculty, as we pointed out, is so important as a balance to the love faculty, because sometimes the idea of at one-ment can get us into a great deal of trouble. One of the simplest analogies of this is, of course, to say, I love potato chips. I mean, I love potato chips. And anything that tastes like potato chips. And of course, we know if there's one way to put on extra weight, it's to love potato chips without using your wisdom faculty, which says to you, no, I'm not really one with the idea of getting fat, and therefore we're going to control this. Now your intellect, and we haven't gotten to the intellect yet, but your intellect should have already told you this, but in case you haven't heard this, then you need to go to your wisdom faculty. So, our wisdom and our love faculty unify us with God, with our world around us. They're tremendously important, and they're located in the area of the heart. Indeed, the heart itself is symbolic of these two faculties. And as I've mentioned, the reason probably that we have such a high rate of illnesses related to the heart is because it's difficult for people to be fully into the consciousness of love. I just heard about a man, an African-American gentleman who's 107 years old. And he looks wonderful. As I said to people, I think he looks a lot better than me. And at 107, he drives his own car. He does everything still that you would normally do. Perhaps not with the speed and grace that someone might use who's much younger. But he's literally living his life in a wonderful way. And I have to add the rest of it, which is a whole other story, which I won't go into. He made the news because he also smoked 7 big cigars every day. And he's been doing that since he was a young man. And he also admitted to having a little whiskey at night. He didn't say a lot, but he said a little whiskey. But the big reason I brought it up, because when you look at the picture of his face, you can see this is a loving man. He has that love faculty working for him. Well, anyway, I've given those lessons, but I've gone through that review for you because, as you realize, what I've talked about are these 6 faculties whose centers of energy have built the torso part of our body. The torso part of our body. Now we're going to look at a part of our body that most of us spend too much time relating to, and that is our head. What has built the head? Well, for the vast eons of evolution, billions of years of evolution, the head was not a major factor in the development of the species. But with the advent of the primate, which is pre-hominid, before we had humans, the ape had a pretty good sized head. The primates have a pretty good sized head, but it was a head with very low brows and not a lot of cavity space here for a brain. But suddenly, all evolution seemed to go to work on that portion of the body, and as we said, the brain capacity got bigger. So that from about 200,000 years ago and to present, it increased something like 65% over what the primates' capacity were. As a side note, I might add that of late in evolution, they tell us that actually the brain has shrunk a little now. And my answer to that is, well, so is all our electronic equipment getting a little smaller all the time too, because it does things better than it used to. But the reason I mention this about the head is because we're now moving into 4 faculties that I am suggesting are responsible for the great increase in the structure of the brain, because their energy centers are located there. The first of these, and the 2 that I want to talk about first, are the faculty of will and the faculty of understanding. And I call these your executive faculties. They're the faculties that began to grow, especially, which as I've already said is about 200, 300,000 years ago. This super growth began to take place because the faculty of will comes out of our capacity to be reflective. We're thinking that somewhere around, again, nobody has a real handhold on the exact time, but somewhere between 200,000 and 300,000 years ago, the human consciousness, take that back, not human consciousness, the consciousness of what was then the primate began to register a little more fully until a point came when suddenly it knew that it was I and you are you. It was able to see the differences, and it began to reflect on what those differences meant to them in life. And with that capacity to reflect began to come also a greater activity of a mind capacity that was always there, but was now expressed through this capacity of reflection, and increased the energy center for will, and we'll talk about understanding. And I've suggested that it was located, I am suggesting to you that it's located in the front lobes of the brain. Our executive faculties are located in the front lobes of our brain, which is a major portion of that increase that took place in time. And you know, when I've said that, I have said that for some time as my own feeling and discovery, and I was more than pleased to discover that there's a book written by a fellow named Elkhonen Goldberg, who's one of the leading neurophysiologists in the world. And his book is entitled The Executive Brain, Frontal Lobes and the Civilized Mind, which is exactly what I'm saying to us. We're talking about the executive faculties. That's our interpretation of it. And here is a neurophysiologist who say, we find the same thing to be true. He didn't know about my work, but I know about his work, and I'm grateful that they are so compatible. So I'm suggesting that the will faculty is located in the left portion of the frontal brain. And the things they seem to find function from that in their lives would indicate this is an act of will. Well, let's talk a little bit about the use of the will faculty. The will faculty is our capacity to make decisions and to focus the attention of consciousness. And today, if you look into the world of people who are writing about the power of consciousness, you'll find that many of them are focused on demonstrating the power of intention. The power of intention. Intention is no more than, and it's a lot, but in terms of understanding it is simply no more than using your will to direct the attention of consciousness to a specific end. Those of you who have watched some of our previous sessions saw me take a very heavy spoon, and using what I said was the power of love, I rubbed that spoon until the spoon handle got soft, and I said I was using the love idea, which is at one-ment. I was putting myself in mind as one with a spoon, and the spoon got warm. You know, just like when you're petting your cat, suddenly it just begins to purr. The cat warms up to your caressing. And so when you love that spoon and you go into it, there's another faculty that's very important to being able to take that spoon handle then and just wrap it up. And that's the faculty of intention, or the faculty of will, which is your intention to see that spoon handle curled up. So those two must be working together. And this is a good place to say, remember I said in the beginning, all these faculties are always working. It's just that some come to the forefront more than others. And in this case, and indeed in almost everything where you are specifically wanting to achieve an end, it is very important that you bring your will faculty into the picture and clarify what is your intention. If you don't have a clear-cut intention, we just say, well, they meant well. What we say, well, we meant well. But meaning well will not get the job done when we talk about the powers of consciousness. To get the job done, we must have intention. Indeed, we have tested in laboratories today people who have healing ability, and they find that in every case, part of their capacity to be healers is to have the intention. You can't go to somebody and say, I'm going to try to heal you, and say, I hope this works. It doesn't work that way. There's got to be the clear-cut intention. One of the greatest philosophic arguments of all times, if you read back through all the great philosophers, sooner or later they all come around to the question, do we have free will or not? And my answer to that is, yes, we do clearly have free will. That's part of that process when humans were allowed by the creative process of God to become reflective. One of the reasons we were given the ability to be reflective is that we will be able to take charge of our own lives. It's just like raising a pack of kids. You want the kids all to have their own will to direct their own lives, to bring uniqueness into their lives. They don't all want to be a carbon copy of you. Just like God, before reflectivity, was the power that was driving evolution, you see. But then with reflection, it's just like God stepped back and said, okay, now you have got to consciously, reflectively learn about yourself. So we have the free will, and often we use that will to get ourselves into situations that are not to our highest good. And then we can know we always have the capacity to go back to that faculty of wisdom and to learn what's the path out of our problem. Well, in the next session, we're going to pick up now on the executive faculties, and we're going to talk about understanding's part in that.